Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. I'd love to know. And if you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, let's jump in.
The moon hung silent over the scorched surface of Veltrax 9, a world so barren even scavengers stopped coming. For 100 years, the galaxy had passed it by, believing it just another husk left behind in the age of collapse. The Empire's maps marked it as a dead zone, radioactive, uninhabitable, forgotten. But deep beneath the cracked crust, something ancient stirred. It began as a whisper in the comms, a thump, then another, steady, like a heartbeat buried under stone. Mining drones from a nearby extraction outpost picked it up first, but the data was dismissed as noise. The next day, the outpost lost power. Then its beacon went dark. Imperial Command sent a scout ship. Just one. It never reported back. The panic didn't come right away. After all, humans were gone. Dead. That was the story. The virus, the collapse, the firestorms on Earth. No one survived. That's what the archives said. That's what the Council taught. No humans, no threat, no reason to be afraid. But on Veltrax 9, the ground began to crack. Not in a natural quake, but in a clean, perfect circle. Machines older than anything in the Empire's archives began to rise. Smooth black metal, etched with markings that no system could translate. At the center, a tower climbed from the dust like a spine through a corpse. It had no lights, no weapons, no sounds, until it spoke. No language, no warning. Just a single deep pulse that sent shockwaves through every frequency, every relay, every ship within 10 light years. Then came the voice. It was calm, human, and terrifying. This world is under Terran control. Leave or be buried with the rest. The Empire didn't know what it had found. They thought it was a ruin, an old signal, some relic from a war long gone. But they were wrong. It wasn't a ruin. It was a warship, and it had just woken up. The warning echoed through space long after the sound had faded. Across the communications grid, devices reset themselves, unable to process the signal. Static clung to every frequency like frost. On Veltrax 9, the black tower stood still as bone, humming low, its foundations trembling with restrained power. Yet nothing moved. It just waited. Back in the heart of the Empire, High Chancellor Valak of the Orlan dynasty read the intercepted message with a flick of his obsidian eyes. A long silence followed. He didn't speak, didn't blink. Just watched the glowing words replay again and again on the holoscreen. This world is under Terran control. Terran. That word hadn't been spoken in a council chamber in nearly 2 centuries. It was taboo. It was a ghost. It was the one scar the galaxy had chosen not to poke, the grave everyone had agreed to bury deep and never dig up. The humans had been wiped out. Everyone had watched Earth die on live feeds and news relays through battlefield cameras beaming horror into every corner of known space. Cities had burned, skies had blackened. The human homeworld turned to ash. The official word was plague. A bio-collapse triggered by their own aggression, their inability to control their emotions, their endless hunger for dominance. But some remembered differently. Some remembered the blockade, the silence from the council, the refusal to send aid when the first cry for help had come. Some remembered watching it happen. Not as tragedy, but as victory. Now that silence was broken, and that was the problem. The Empire had grown in that silence. It had expanded, conquered, reshaped what was left of the old human colonies. Veltrax 9 itself had once been Terran soil long ago, before the maps were redrawn, before Earth became a curse word. It was once known as Arcadia Base, home to Earth's Eastern Fleet Command. No one remembered that now. At least, no one in power. And that was their mistake, because someone did remember. Something. What had risen from the dirt wasn't just a tower, it was a signal tower, a key, a trigger. Something built not to fight but to wake up other things. If it had activated now after lying dead for 200 years, it meant something else had been listening. Something buried, something waiting, scattered across 1,000 forgotten systems. And if one warship had risen, there could be more. That was the stake. It wasn't just about Veltrax 9. It wasn't even about humans coming back. It was about the lie. The one lie the galaxy depended on to sleep at night. The humans were gone. Because if they weren't, if humanity had survived any piece of it, then everything changed. Every planet taken, every system colonized in their absence, every war justified by their extinction became something else. A theft, a betrayal, a crime. It meant that every empire in the galaxy now sat on stolen ground. And every stolen thing has a price. In the hours that followed the signal, panic began to slither through the empire's hierarchy. The military response was quick, brutal, and loud. Fleet Commander Stren ordered an immediate lockdown on Veltrax 9. All mining operations ceased, all non-empire traffic barred. 2 destroyers and a carrier were dispatched to orbit with instructions to contain the anomaly. The tower was to be studied, then dismantled if possible, vaporized if not. But deep in the subdecks of the lead ship, the ISS Archelon tech crews found themselves staring at screens that made no sense. The tower was emitting low-band signals on old Terran military channels, formats no longer used, frequencies scrubbed from standard Navcom directories. But more than that, it was listening. It was bouncing those signals outwards, seeking something. Each time the pulse went out, it returned faster, stronger, like it was narrowing in. Somewhere out there, other signals were answering. Worse still, the scans revealed that the structure wasn't powered by nuclear cores or plasma arrays. It ran on something older, more terrifying, a Terran war core. A fusion of bioreactive AI and semi-sentient energy fields that fed off intent, memory, and heat signatures. The kind of tech outlawed after Earth fell. The kind of tech that didn't just act, it decided. Which meant the tower wasn't just awake, it was aware. On the second day, the tower shifted. A soft vibration began to hum through the surface of Veltrax 9, subtle at first, then rising in intensity. The Empire's scientists scrambled to find explanations. Tectonic movement, weapon test, seismic instability. None of it fit. The readings weren't random, they were deliberate. Morse pulses, rhythmic, calculated. And then came the data dump. Every Imperial ship within the system began experiencing file breaches, coded bursts injected into their systems before firewalls even registered the intrusion. A few seconds of garbled script, then images, audio files, flashes of war, screams, battle footage, human soldiers, Earth cities, the final broadcasts from Earth's surface, right before it all went black, and beneath it all the same voice. We did not forget. Neither should you. For the younger soldiers, it was confusing. For the officers, it was concerning. But for the admirals, it was pure terror. Because some of them had served in the last war. Some of them had seen human warships up close. The Titan-class juggernauts, the orbital drop battalions, the last-line shock divisions who kept fighting even after their worlds burned. They remembered. That's what scared them most. Because they knew what the humans had built before the fall. Bunkers, caches, sleeper units, AI cores that could go dormant for centuries. Fail-safes. And now one of those fail-safes had activated, not by chance, not by accident, by design. Which meant the war wasn't starting. It had already started. And they had no idea how far it had spread. Across the stars, in long-dead systems and shattered colonies, lights began to flicker back to life. Echoes of human code pinged off satellites believed lost. Derelict ships powered on for the first time in generations. And on the cold edge of the Orith Nebula, a relay buoy blinked once, then twice, broadcasting a signal that hadn't been heard since Earth died. Revenant protocol confirmed, awaiting command. On Veltrax 9, the tower grew brighter. The Empire stood frozen. The Council hesitated. The galaxy held its breath. Because if even one warship like the legends said still existed, then the Empire's ruin had already begun. 1,000 kilometers above Veltrax 9, beyond the planet's dust-choked orbit, a ghost stirred in the dark. At first it appeared as nothing more than debris, an ancient hull drifting through the void, scarred by time and forgotten battles. It had no power signature, no life signs, no movement, just silence. But when the tower on Veltrax 9 lit up, so did something else. Inside the husk, buried beneath centuries of rust and ash, dormant systems blinked once, like an old man opening his eyes for the first time in a lifetime. Then again, brighter. A low thrum rolled through the forgotten corridors. Frozen servos groaned as hydraulics fought against the weight of time. Lights flickered down its spine, red first, then orange, then a steady, icy blue. The ship wasn't broken, it was sleeping, hibernating, and now it had been called TSS Trident, Terran designation, Deep Space Tactical Supercruiser, built during the last years of the Human Empire War. Last recorded status MIA, presumed destroyed during the evacuation of the Artemis Belt. But it wasn't destroyed. It had been hidden, placed into long-term stealth orbit behind Veltrax 9 under the final clause of Revenant Protocol, the last order given by the Terran High Command. If Earth falls, we do not vanish. We wait. We rise when the stars forget us. Inside the ship's cryochamber, the preservation systems groaned awake. Cold fog hissed from thick frost-caked pipes. A row of pods lined the chamber, their surfaces coated in a thin layer of frost, names long worn away by time. One of them cracked, then shattered. Captain Adric Kale fell forward from the pod, landing hard on his knees. His breath came in sharp rasps, chest heaving. The air smelled of metal and old oil. His muscles burned from stasis shock, his bones aching like splintered glass. But his eyes burned with memory. He coughed, wiped blood from his lips, and forced himself up. The chamber lights turned on fully, recognizing his presence. As he staggered to his feet, the familiar voice of the ship's AI, Ro, buzzed to life. Glitchy at first, but stabilizing fast. "Welcome back, Captain Kale. You have been asleep for 187 years. Revenant signal received. Status: hostile activity detected on Veltrax 9. Current situation unknown. Primary orders: awaken, retaliate." Kale blinked slowly, pain radiating down his spine. Status of crew? A pause. "All cryopods. Offline. Vital signs negative. You are the last." Silence followed, heavy as a tomb. Kale closed his eyes. He had feared it, but hearing it confirmed it was like being shot all over again. Everyone was gone. His squad, his XO, his shipmates. He stood alone inside a tomb that used to be a weapon. For a moment, his heart threatened to shatter under the weight of that truth. Then the memory came back. The virus, the burning cities, Earth's final stand. The Council watching from afar like vultures, waiting for the flames to die down before they came to scavenge the bones. The promise he had made when the order came to fall back. "If we survive this, I swear, we will never let them forget." The fire inside him flared again. "Ro," he said, his voice firmer now. "Bring this ship back online. Prioritize propulsion, weapons, and comms. Skip the medical bay. I've survived worse." "Affirmative, Captain. Warning. Reactor status at 34%. External hull damage at 68%. Forward thrusters functioning at reduced output. Weapons array, partially operational." 1 functioning rail cannon, 2 salvageable missile pods. Recommend defensive operations only. Kale grinned, an old tired grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. We'll make do. The ship groaned beneath him as systems engaged one by one. Power surged through long-dead wires, flickering lights stabilizing into steady illumination. In the command bridge, old chairs reassembled from folded stasis form. Tactical displays blinked with rough outlines of local space. The Trident's long-dead heart was beating again. On the main screen, an image of Veltrax 9 shimmered into view, dusty and brown, a scarred world marked now with a pulsing red beacon from the tower's signal. Surrounding it, the faint blips of Imperial ships circled like vultures. Kale zoomed in. 1 destroyer, 2 cruisers, a command frigate. The Empire hadn't come to ask questions. They'd come to silence it. Of course they did, he muttered, fingers flying across the console. Same game, different century. As the comms crackled back to life, he caught fragments of their chatter. Scans, orders, position reports. Then the most important thing, fear. They didn't know what the tower was, they didn't know it had sent a message. But they knew it was human. And that made them afraid. And fear. Fear was a weapon. "Row," he said, voice low. "Patch me into open frequency. I want them to hear me." There was a pause. "Comm stable. You are live." Captain Adric Kale leaned forward. "This is Captain Kale of the Terran supercruiser Trident. To the Imperial fleet above Veltrax 9, I give you 1 warning. That planet is Terran ground. You're trespassing. If you value your ships, your soldiers, or your lives, turn away now." A beat, then static, then laughter from the other end, arrogant, sharp. A voice replied, "We destroyed your kind a long time ago, Ghost. Stay buried." Kale's smile vanished. He cut the feed. "Row," he said coldly. "Target the lead destroyer. Ready missile pod 1. Disable if you can. Cripple if you must, but make sure they remember. Coordinates locked. Firing." In the dark of space, the Trident shuddered. A sleek, rust-covered missile slid from its pod and streaked toward the Imperial ship, invisible to their outdated scanners until it was too late. A blinding explosion followed, no full detonation, just a precise hit along the starboard thruster array. The destroyer began to spiral, power flickering. In the control deck of the Imperial fleet, alarms blared. Officers shouted. Suddenly, they were no longer dealing with a signal. They were dealing with a threat. Back aboard the Trident, Kale didn't celebrate. He had just opened the first chapter of a war that should have ended 2 centuries ago. But now, it was just beginning. Alarms echoed through the flagship ISS Vornax like sirens in a tomb. The ship's central holomap buzzed with static as commanders scrambled to lock down visual feeds. Captain Kale's voice still hung in the air like poison, calm, clear, and unmistakably human. A word no one on the bridge had expected to hear spoken aloud. A word they were taught was extinct. General Rulon paced across the command deck, his taloned fingers tapping against his armored gauntlet. The back of his neck itched. Old soldier instinct. Not fear. Not yet. But something close. The destroyer Dauntless was still spinning in slow motion below them, leaking fuel and power, her crew broadcasting emergency signals as they tried to stabilize. "This is nonsense," Rulon growled. "A dead ship. 1 human. That's all? Then strike him from the sky." "No," whispered one of the older lieutenants. "You didn't hear it, sir. Not just what he said. How he said it." Rulon turned, teeth bared. "What are you mumbling about?" The lieutenant looked down, nervous. "That was an officer, a Terran officer. They don't bluff." But it wasn't just the missile strike, it was what happened after. Across the fleet's encrypted comms, systems began to glitch. At first it was just sensor overlays flickering, then targeting reticles drifted off lock. Then tactical maps shifted themselves, rerouting false data through secure feeds. Entire ship profiles were rewritten mid-battle. A battleship AI started replaying archived footage from the Human Empire War on its main view screen. Images of ground invasions, orbital bombardments, Terran fleets in perfect formation. The tech teams tried to isolate the hack. They couldn't. The interference wasn't from a cyber attack. It was a resonance signal, a buried protocol reacting to the Revenant broadcast from Veltrax 9. The code was old, pre-Empire, Terran defense imprinting, the kind of software that wasn't meant to attack systems. It was meant to remind them. And it was working. All across the Veltrax system, the Empire's ships were bleeding control. Their crews, raised on myth and doctrine, were seeing something they were never meant to face: truth. That the Terrans had planned for this. Not just one ship, not just one man, but a network, a legacy. And it was waking up. Down on Veltrax 9, the tower pulsed brighter with each passing hour. Its signal had shifted into full-spectrum spread, bouncing from ancient satellites to derelict jump gates, to long-forgotten relay stations lost in the shadows of gas giants. The message was constant now, steady as a war drum. We remember. We rise. Back on the Trident, Kale watched the chaos unfold from his bridge. A flicker of emotion crossed his face. Satisfaction, maybe, or resolve. But he didn't celebrate. He knew better than anyone that one strike was not a victory, it was a declaration. And declarations always came with consequences. Row status report. The AI responded instantly. Imperial fleet in disarray, communications unstable, probability of full retaliation 86%. However, when we are not alone. Kale's brow furrowed. Define. Multiple signal responses detected. Buried Terran nodes and neighboring systems have activated. Estimated source count 5. No direct connection yet, but all are responding to the Veltrax beacon. Additional chatter suggests mobility. Kale stood slowly, staring at the screen. They're waking up. He tapped a command into the console. The star map expanded, dozens of systems lighting up as fragments of Terran code pinged off old satellites. Hidden facilities, bunkers, debris fields, even old planetary mining bases marked abandoned for generations now showed faint pulsing signals. Not loud, not yet, but undeniable. The silence was over, and the Empire was not prepared. In a distant system called Mavros Reach, a scout ship stumbled upon an asteroid that wasn't on any Imperial map. It had been hollowed out long ago and filled with dormant pods. When the scouts scanned it, the surface cracked open like an egg. Inside were 5 cryochambers. One was open. One Terran soldier stood, eyes bloodshot, breathing hard. The scout turned and ran. Too late. On the icy moon of Kirin 5, a long-dead comms tower blinked once, then twice, then opened its archives. It projected a hologram in the sky of a child holding a Terran flag. No words, just the image. Locals gathered beneath it in silence. On Barrow Station, a criminal outpost run by smugglers and black market traders, a woman with gray hair and a scar across her jaw dropped her drink when her old Earth-issued communicator started flashing. She hadn't touched it in 70 years, but the signal had found her. Her hands shook as she picked it up. A single line glowed across the cracked screen. Rise. Earth remembers you. Back on Veltrax, the Empire was falling apart at the seams. Admiral Rulon had ordered a full planetary strike, wiped the tower clean. But none of the cruisers could get a lock. The signal was interfering with targeting systems. Worse, every time they sent a command, it was intercepted, copied, and thrown back at them, with slight changes, corrections, humiliations. On one screen, a message appeared. You are playing checkers on a chessboard built by ghosts. And yet still the Empire believed it could win. So they prepared a ground assault, Dropships loaded with shock troops began their descent to the surface. Armored divisions, atmospheric drones, walker units. They had numbers. They had gear. They had been taught that Terrans were extinct, but what they didn't have was fear. And that was their greatest weakness, because fear sharpens instincts. Fear makes you careful. Fear makes you respect what you're about to fight. Captain Kale saw the landing ships approaching. He didn't blink. He knew what lay under the dirt of Veltrax 9. He had read the old Revenant protocols. He had helped write some of them. And he knew that the tower was not the weapon. The tower was the trigger. The real weapon was buried deeper, still sleeping, but not for long. The first of the Empire's dropships breached the upper atmosphere of Veltrax 9 just after dawn, their metal hulls glowing with friction as they plunged through clouds thick with static. They came in squadrons of 12, staggered across the sky like steel vultures with troop carriers tucked tight beneath gunships and recon drones weaving through the upper air currents. Dust blew into cyclones as the first ship landed with a heavy hiss of hydraulics, its side doors already opening before the ground fully steadied. Soldiers poured out, rows of armored infantry, eyes hidden behind gleaming visors, rifles glowing with charged plasma. Behind them came the heavier walkers, mechanical beasts that groaned under their own weight, each step shaking the cracked surface like a war drum. High Command protocol demanded total containment, and the generals obeyed with fervor. This wasn't just another operation. This was about optics, power, reassurance. The Empire had to show the galaxy that ghosts didn't scare them, but they were about to learn that some ghosts don't stay dead, and some tombs don't stay closed. From his position aboard the Trident, Captain Kale watched the landings unfold on the tactical map. Red dots bled across the surface like a spreading infection, troop clusters, vehicles, deployment beacons. He leaned forward, fingers drumming lightly on the armrest of his chair. "Row," he said quietly. "Calculate resistance timeline." The AI responded without pause. Based on troop numbers and current terrain distribution, tower containment estimated within 42 minutes. Kale nodded, eyes narrowing. "And the fail-safe?" "Awakening now," Rose said, voice quieter. "Pulse readings are rising exponentially. Subsurface vault opening in T-5 minutes. Captain, this is not a facility, it is a launch cradle." Kyle exhaled slowly. Then they just kicked the wrong hive. Down on Veltrax 9, the Empire's lead squad had advanced to the tower's perimeter. Their boots crunched against a surface that didn't feel like rock. It was too smooth, too uniform. The closer they got, the more alien the terrain began to look, until one of the soldiers, a recon scout named Varric, paused and knelt. "Commander," he said through the comms, "this isn't dirt. It's plating." "Repeat," came the reply. "It's metal, sir. The entire valley. We're standing on a shell." Before his commander could respond, the tower pulsed. A deep, vibrating sound that tore through armor, through bone, through memory. The light it gave off was not bright. It was heavy, a dark hue that felt like sinking into cold water. Every Imperial system within a kilometer radius glitched. Targeting lenses blinked out. HUDs rebooted. Drones dropped from the sky mid-hover. Then the ground cracked. A perfect circle widened beneath the tower's base. Seamless steel parted like opening jaws. Steam hissed from vents the Empire didn't even know were there. And from the center of that widening chasm, something began to rise. At first, it looked like a black spire. But as it climbed, piece by piece, it became clear. This wasn't a structure. It was a machine. A warform, 30 meters tall, plated in Terran armor so dense it warped scanner signals. Its arms were lined with railgun housings. Its chest bore the old Terran insignia, Earth's eagle, wings folded downward into a dive. Across its shoulders, etched in weathered script, "Revenant Unit 01, the first to fall, the last to strike." Inside the cockpit, its AI awoke, an old prototype combat program named Astra. She blinked to life like someone gasping out of a nightmare. Core integrity at 67%, weapons offline, defensive systems active. Hostiles detected, awakening combat subroutines. As Revenant Unit 01 stepped free of its cradle, the Empire's forward squads hesitated. Their commanders screamed through the comms, ordering them to fire, to engage, to hold their ground. But none of that mattered, because Revenant didn't wait. Its shoulder-mounted cannons rotated and opened fire before the first Imperial unit could aim. The ground lit up in a series of piercing white arcs, anti-personnel rail bolts that vaporized armor on contact. One squad disappeared in an instant. Another turned and ran, only for a hidden turret beneath the soil to rise and mow them down before they reached cover. Then came the charge. Revenant moved with a speed no machine its size should have had. Its arms twisted, converting into dual plasma scythes that cut through walker legs like paper. One vehicle exploded in a ball of heat and twisted metal. Another flipped and landed hard, scattering its crew like broken toys. Inside the Empire's command ship, General Rulon was frozen. His jaw clenched, eyes wide as he watched the live feeds spiral into red alerts. His lead battalion was gone in under 3 minutes. This is impossible, he whispered. But Kale's voice interrupted his thoughts, piping through a hijacked channel. You came to bury our past. Instead, you dug up your future. Back aboard the Trident, Kale issued the next order. Row, trigger system-wide beacon ping. Target all Revenant-class nodes. Affirmative, said Rowe, initiating protocol cascade. Across nearby star systems, old silent dormant facilities heard the call. On the moons of auras, cryopods hissed open in a hidden cave bunker. On the junk world of Tertius Delta, a half-buried frigate began to hum. On a derelict outpost orbiting a gas giant, an AI core blinked awake and whispered, Directive, survive. Directive, strike. Back on Veltrax 9, the Revenant warform stood alone in the valley, its frame smoking, its systems running hot. Around it, the remains of the Empire's first strike force lay scattered. Some smoldering, others half buried in the soft ash the battle had kicked up. And still more ships were descending. Kale stared at the incoming data. The Empire didn't understand yet. They thought they were responding to an uprising, and they didn't know they had just walked into a resurrection. The battle on Veltrax 9 lasted 7 hours. That was all it took to turn an entire battalion of the Empire's finest into a field of twisted armor and flame. The orbital fleet, watching from above, had sent orders. Reinforce, deploy artillery, hold the ground. But every message they sent was swallowed in static and returned in silence. By the end of the 8th hour, only 3 words came back from the surface. Containment failed. Retreat. The Empire didn't broadcast it. They didn't have to. Because the stars were already listening. The signal that started from the Revenant Tower had reached further than any Empire transmission. It hadn't just traveled through standard channels. It had awakened the old pathways. Sub-layered frequencies embedded in ancient Terran beacons, outdated relay systems buried in orbital junk, even the old forgotten ghost satellites that hadn't lit up in a century. They blinked to life and repeated the same transmission. Human warship activated, Revenant protocol engaged. We remember. In the glittering center of the galaxy, in the heart of the Galactic Council Citadel, that signal hit like a thunderclap. Ambassadors, chancellors, military leaders, and planetary rulers gathered in emergency session. They stood beneath the high dome of the speakers' hall, a structure carved from moonstone and wrapped in artificial starlight. It had been built as a place of unity, peace, deliberation. Now it was a furnace of fear. No verified proof confirms human survival, rasped the Elvari emissary, her voice as brittle as dry glass. We must investigate, but we cannot allow panic to override. It's not about survival, snapped the Archon of the Gravis Collective, slamming his steel hand onto the table. It's about activation. They planned this. The signal came through every buried line we missed. It hit our deep net. That's not a fluke. That's a resurrection. Across the table, the Dominion's representative, the same empire whose troops had just been slaughtered on Veltrax 9, stood rigid. His voice was strained but controlled. Our battalions faced a weapon we did not understand. A machine, one we believed destroyed in the fall of Earth. The Revenant-class warforms were myths. They were insurance, muttered another counselor, and they just cashed in. An ancient being floated into the center of the chamber, light bending around its translucent body. The keeper of archives, oldest among them, hadn't spoken aloud in over 70 years. But now its voice buzzed from every speaker at once. You thought humans were a moment, an accident, but they were always a pattern. You left the edges of the galaxy littered with their bones, and now their bones remember. A heavy silence followed. Then a message arrived, uncoded, unfiltered, broadcast on every open channel within the Council's secure comms. The image flickered to life, a scarred man in a Terran captain's uniform standing aboard a ship dark with age but humming with power. Behind him, the sigil of Earth glowed faintly. Kale. He didn't shout, he didn't threaten, he just looked directly into the lens with tired, burning eyes. You left us to die, you signed our extinction, but now you will remember us. You don't get to choose how history ends. We do. The transmission cut. The room fell into chaos. Some called for immediate mobilization. Others demanded negotiation. But underneath the shouting, one fact echoed through every species present. They weren't dealing with survivors. They were dealing with survivors who had prepared. Back on Veltrax 9, the field was still smoking. The first Revenant war form had returned to standby mode, embedded in a defense trench now fortified by dozens of emerging turrets. Its sensors were still hot, its targeting systems locked. But Kale wasn't there anymore. The Trident had already moved on, slipping quietly into dark space, leaving nothing behind but the wreckage and the signal. Kale stood on the bridge, arms crossed, as the last data feeds from Veltrax 9 played out across the holo display. Send a scatterburst, he ordered. Encrypted Terran net, all ghost codes, priority 1. Ro obeyed without hesitation. Across the stars, dormant outposts blinked online. In the drift fields of Astera 4, a massive freighter thought lost to time activated its core. On the mining world of Loris Prime, underground vault doors opened with hissing steam as an entire squad of cryo-soldiers stood up, weapons auto-calibrating before their eyes were even fully open. In the dead rings of Cyprus 6, a long-dead orbital cannon hummed, charged and fired into the emptiness, its flare bright enough to be seen from 2 systems away. And in the slums of Council-owned spaceports, among the forgotten and the broken, those with Terran blood began to whisper again. They didn't know the whole story. They didn't know the plan. But they knew the feeling. The fire was back. On a smuggler ship called the Bastard of Luna, a young woman heard the signal while adjusting an old Terran beacon hidden in the hull. She froze, listened, then smiled. They're not just coming back, she said aloud. They never left. The Council's response came quickly, but without unity. 7 empires voted to form a joint fleet. 5 refused. 2 abstained entirely, sending emergency communications to their deep archives instead. Fear split the chamber like a fracture. Behind closed doors, the Dominion was already planning a counterstrike, not against the Trident, against the idea, the resurrection. They would send black ops teams, infiltration units. They would hunt down every active Terran relic and destroy it before the movement could spread further. But they were already too late. The Revenant Protocol hadn't just awakened machines, it had awakened memory. It had awakened the rage that came with being erased, and that rage had already started to move. Back in the dark of space, the Trident traveled in silence, its engines whisper quiet, its path unpredictable. Kale stood at the viewport, eyes focused on a distant star. Rose spoke gently. Next destination locked. Signal detected on the edge of the Proteus line. Coordinates suggest multiple Terran assets. Confirmation, incoming. Kyle didn't turn. He only said 2 words. Wake them. The ship that Kale once called home no longer glided through the void like a shadow. It surged like a storm. The Trident had changed in the weeks since Veltrax 9. Its repairs had outpaced its age. Energy flowed through its conduits like blood through veins, and though its systems bore scars, they pulsed with purpose. The ship had found its captain, its mission. And across the stars, others had answered the call. They called them ghost fleets, Terran warships lost to time, presumed buried, vaporized, or swallowed by black holes. But they hadn't been destroyed. They had been hidden, sealed in asteroid shells, buried in collapsed moons, entombed beneath crusted ice worlds, waiting for a signal. Now they lit up the night. The TSS Valiant emerged from an orbital graveyard in the ruins of the Tyrrell Expanse. The Hammerfall, patched together from old siege hulls and mercenary scrap, flew a hand-painted flag, earth blue and bone white. The Nova Scar, once the fastest courier ship of the Terran fleet, roared back to life like a blade unsheathed. With every ship that rose, more colonies ignited, more prisoners revolted, more exiles returned to duty. They weren't an army in the traditional sense. They had no banner, no government, no clear chain of command. They were chaos stitched together with memory and rage. Each cell fought its own battle, lit its own fires, and together they were burning the map. Kale watched the rebellion unfold across the stars. System after system flared with conflict. Council-controlled planets suddenly found themselves under siege from guerrilla fighters with Terran blood. Ancient defense satellites reactivated and fired on passing Council cruisers. Trade routes collapsed, empires quaked. Diplomats shouted over each other while their worlds burned behind them. And amidst it all, one message kept repeating, "We are the fire, you are the fuel." In desperation, the Galactic Council convened one final emergency summit, this time not to debate but to decide. The vote was unanimous. No more hesitation, no more diplomacy. Activate Extinction Protocol. A fleet of over 300 ships was mobilized. Every empire contributed. Dreadnoughts, carriers, swarm hives, artillery barges. It was the most powerful armada the galaxy had assembled since the fall of Earth. Their mission, erase the last of the Terrans from history. Their target, a small, seemingly unimportant system known only by its old Terran designation, Sector Requiem. That was where Kale had led them. It wasn't bait, it was a message. The Council's fleet emerged from slipspace in perfect formation, their arrival shattering the dark like thunder. At first, the system looked empty, no ships, no resistance, just an old broken moon orbiting a dead planet. Then the beacon lit up, and the sky cracked open. From behind the shattered moon, the Ghost Fleet arrived, the Trident, the Valiant, the Hammerfall, the Nova Scar, and behind them 27 more. Some barely held together, some gleamed with fresh armor. But all of them burned with the same fury. Each one carried soldiers who had once watched Earth burn. Now they had returned not to rebuild, but to remind. Kale stood on the bridge of the Trident, armored and silent. He didn't give a speech. He didn't need to. The warships beside him didn't wait for permission. They opened fire. The first minutes were a storm of light. Missiles screamed through space, railguns cracked like lightning. Plasma beams carved the void in arcs of raw power. The Council's fleet returned fire, confident in their numbers. But numbers didn't matter, because the Terrans didn't fight fair. They had nothing to lose. While the front lines clashed in brutal bursts of fury, cloaked ships slipped behind the enemy formation, delivering drop pods onto command bridges. Viral code flooded Council flagships, turning friendly targeting systems against their own. Deep sleep cyber AIs, activated during the protocol, infected the network and shut down dreadnought shields mid-fire. Within 30 minutes, a third of the fleet was gone. Within an hour, half. Inside the Trident, Kale targeted the Council's command ship, a Leviathan built to withstand sieges protected by 4 rotating carriers. He remembered it. It was the Arclight Sovereign, once responsible for Earth's quarantine blockade, the ship that had broadcast Earth's death sentence to the galaxy. Kale's voice went out on an open channel. "This is Captain Adric Kale of the Terran supercruiser Trident. You watched our planet die. You called it peace. Now you will know justice." He fired the last of his warheads. The Sovereign tried to run. It didn't make it. The explosion that followed lit the system like a sunrise. When the flash faded, only pieces remained. The battle continued, but the tide had turned. The Council fleet fractured, scattering in panic. Those who fled were marked. No safe harbor, no retreat. The Terrans pursued them like wolves set loose in a field of sheep. By the end of the day, Sector Requiem was silent again, but not empty. In orbit above the dead world, the Terran fleet held its ground, scarred and battered but victorious. Fires burned in the husks of ships drifting nearby. The galaxy had been watching, and now it couldn't look away. Back on the bridge of the Trident, Kale leaned over the command console, his breathing steady, his eyes locked on the data feed showing the fleeing survivors. "Is it over?" Ro asked quietly. Kale didn't answer right away. Then finally, "Number not yet. Not until they understand." Ro pulsed softly. "Understand what?" Kale looked up at the stars, at the quiet void between them. "That we don't want revenge. We want memory. And we'll make this galaxy remember us, one fire at a time." Epilogue. Decades later, no one in the galaxy would dare speak the word extinct when talking about humans. Their worlds were few, their people scattered, but their presence was undeniable. In Council archives, a new classification was born: Terrans, status unconquerable. Some called them monsters, others called them myths. But everyone remembered, and that was all they ever wanted.